wonder if we've got an affirmation of faith. We sure do. And do we have the words there, Brian, for everybody? I want to share these words. These are beautiful words as we think about all that we heard, in all good jest and good fun, but also in the way that we can all really relate to, I think, fear and the need for peace in our lives. Let's just share these words as you feel able and comfortable together, and you at home as well. We believe in a God who knows our fears. We believe in a God who says, "Be not afraid." We believe in a God who kicks off her shoes and wades into the muck of our lives with us. We believe in a God who stitches herself to our heels and invites us to dance. We believe in a God who hemmed stars into the night sky so that we can find our way home, and who sends us friends with open doors so we can find our way to love. We believe in a God who finds us in our fear and does not leave us alone. Thanks be to God for a love like that. Amen. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Let me just grab this here. So, everybody, I got a question for you this morning. This is not a trick question, I promise. But I wonder, by show of hands this morning, sorry, Internet, if I'm beaming with a halo. We're working on that, actually. Raise your hand if you've ever been afraid. Anybody ever been afraid? Be honest now. Right? That is a common experience as human beings, isn't it? Like, we all feel fear. 600 million searches in 2020 on the very popular YouVersion Bible app on the App Store. That's just one app in 2020. 600 million searches for the word fear. Interesting to track that. It goes from fear to justice to healing through 2020 into 2021. Isn't that an interesting arc, right? But the Bible's most repeated phrase to us is three words that we said today. It's don't be a, right? Here's the thing about that. All human beings, every living thing that creeps and crawls and flies and swims on earth feels fear. It's one of the reasons why we're all alive and we've all evolved to be here today. Our fear is actually a really important emotion. It's wired in us. Fear as an emotion is neither good nor bad. It just is. So what do we mean when we say to people, don't be afraid? Let me sing this song. And if you know the words, join in with me. The choirs said they're going to leave me out on a ledge on this one. But I'm going to sing this. Hopefully it's going to be a good pitch. And join in. And what I want you to think about in your heart is, how does it make you feel, okay? Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near. How'd that make you feel? Peace. Anybody else? Warm. I feel that John Bell song is so simple, but it's like a cozy blanket. And when I feel like my life is all upsot, that is, you just kind of wrap yourself in that prayer shawl. It's beautiful. I love that piece. And I was speaking about fear with a friend of mine who did not grow up shaped by the United Church tradition, although that is very much a part of their lives these days. We were talking about fear, and they said to me, why do we sing this song, Don't Be Afraid? I said, I love that song. They're like, yeah, I don't. It's like, oh, well, tell me about that. And they said, well, it's like you're saying, I'm not allowed to feel fear, or that I shouldn't feel fear, or that my fear is somehow absurd, that if I just had enough faith, I would know God's here all the time to take away my fear, and so to be afraid is kind of ridiculous. And they looked at me and they said, I'm a minority. I spend a lot of my time with people telling me how I should feel, how I should behave, and even who I should love. That's why I'm not a big fan of that piece. I went, oh, wow, I'd never heard it that way before. And that really piqued my interest in it, of kind of going, what do we mean? And how do people hear when we say, don't be afraid in Scripture or, in church? And I would say that I'm going to wager that a lot of people who gather as part of Bedford United, we don't spend a lot of time up at night worrying about whether the devil is going to get us. But I do think we think of fear as an enemy or as a monster under the bed, right? That's always tracking us down, that we want to overcome or defeat. And one of the interesting things about that in the Bible and in our faith language in particular, you're either captivated by your fear or you've been liberated from your fear, but there ain't no in between. You're either in it or out of it, right? And that's an interesting way to look at it. I think that emotions, just the emotion, not the behavior, just the emotion, they're not bad. They're not good. They just are. They're part of our human condition and the experience of being alive and conscious in this universe. Like, there'd be a whole lot less suffering if human beings could come to that understanding. I wonder how it would feel to make peace with our fear. Lots of you know that when I was younger, my mom died when I was 10. And it was a brutal loss in our family. I mean, it broke my heart, almost broke up my spirit and our family when it happened. It was awful. Mom died in the summer. And, a couple of weeks after she died, my friends, and in Weymouth Street in St. John's in those days in the early 90s, there were like 30 kids in the neighborhood, and we all played Spotlight. That was our Olympic sport. If you have not played Spotlight, I'm so sorry for you. Go get a flashlight, do it tonight. You will find peace, I'm telling you. And so we're playing Spotlight, having a gas. I'm laughing, chatting with my friends in between rounds. And one of the boys in the neighborhood comes up to me, and he just stands there, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, playing Spotlight." And he was like, "Didn't your mom just die?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "If my mom died, I would be home in my room scared to death, bawling my eyes out. I can't believe you're out here playing with us." I had really low self-esteem as a kid, but I was really proud of my response in that moment as I stood my ground and I said, "You know what? You don't get to tell me how I feel. God knows how I feel. And that's enough." And I walked away. Then, of course, I went home, cried myself, that's out, right? But in that moment, I was there. I had it. Yeah, but it's an interesting thing that we live under this sort of idea that, there's a proper way to feel in every situation. There's an expectation of how you should be. And that's a lot to carry on our shoulders as human beings. And that if you don't live up to that expectation, you ought to be ashamed, or you're not enough, or there's something wrong with you, right? I experienced, and I bet most of you, with that kind of death in my life, a grief, a pain, a loss, and tremendous fear during especially those early years. But, as I look back now, I would also say, and I also experienced hope, peace, joy, and love as well. Because after Mom died, I got to see what it means for a family to love and support each other, even though they're messy human beings. And I got to see a neighborhood come together and be there for my whole family. I had a St. James United Church in St. John's, Newfoundland, and the whole community rallied around us in ways that still give me chills and remind me of the power of what a faith community can do. And I got to see that behavior modeled in my neighbors and in my mentors. Like, grief broke my heart over and over again. It absolutely did. But it's also the best teacher I've ever had in my entire life. And my grief and my fear and my loss have shaped me into the person that I am. And you know what? I like who I am. I hope you like who you are too. There's nothing wrong or to be ashamed about that. You can feel more than one emotion at the same time. And you can understand, I think we can hold in our brains that more than one thing can be true at the same time in this universe. Welcome to the contradiction of existence in the universe we live in. I wish we could make peace with that already, because I think we'd be a lot healthier if we could. One definition of courage is that it's fear that has said its prayers, right? Both things are true. And, peace, I don't think, is the absence of fear. I don't think any of us can have a complete absence of fear in our lives. Peace isn't the absence of fear, it's the presence of understanding, compassion, community, connectedness, relationship in the midst of our fear. I'm reading this fascinating book. I hope some of you pick it up because I really do think it's amazing. It's called Before the Big Bang, The Origin of the Universe and What Lies Beyond. It's by Laura Marcini Houghton. She's one of our world's leading cosmologists. And Laura grew up in Albania during the Soviet Union, probably one of the most repressed areas of the Soviet Union in those days. So fear was literally everywhere for her growing up. She never knew if her dad was going to be taken by the state because he was a professor, and depending on which way the wind was blowing, they might like what he had to say and they might not. She lived every day as a little kid watching what she said, watching where she went, who she talked to, knowing that was all being recorded all the time. Can you imagine? And she writes these 3 lines. She's a brilliant writer, but these 3 lines in her introduction I wanted to share. She says, "The only place that was open to us was the sky and the stars above. The state couldn't stop us from looking up. As a young child, I could escape into the stars." Right? Both things are true. This emotion of fear that she's feeling all the time, at the same time, she's able to feel wonder and curiosity and hope about what's going to happen to her and the world and that we live in. Both things are true. The behavior of fear, of when somebody uses fear to manipulate, to create a system of repression that forces people to do what they want so they can hold on to power, that is evil. The emotion of fear is not good or bad. It's just part of being human. I think about the tree lighting that we had. The blessed Christmas tree, Sylvia. That blessed Christmas tree. When we were there for the tree lighting, celebration of light and life, right? We're outside. We're shaking our tail feathers because Bertha has requested rocking around the Christmas tree. We're all belting that outside. And then someone had the audacity to request let it snow, which always gets like a from the crowd. Anyway, we did it. So we're laughing. We're carrying on. We're having a great time. And then we read the names that represent each one of those light bulbs on that tree. And some of those names are stars of hope that light our way today. And lots of those names are scars on our hearts that have names. And some of those scars haven't healed over just yet. And people are on the edge of that light, just holding on. You can feel it. The grief, the loss, I don't even know if I'm going to get through Christmas this year, with rocking around the Christmas tree. Let it snow. All of that is in that mixed cup together as a community. And then at the end, our challenge is whether the kids could get a noise complaint against the bylaw for doing the loudest countdown Bedford has ever seen before we lit the tree. And all of that happened at the same time, right? I wonder, the emotion of fear is not an enemy to be defeated. It's not a monster under our bed. It's not good or bad. Emotions are just part of our body telling us what it means to be alive as human beings. I wonder if we can find a way to make peace with our fear. Right? Could we learn to see that fear is not, or peace is not the absence of fear, but it's that presence of understanding and compassion and relationship and community in the midst of that fear. And if we want to see a role model for this, we really have to look no further than to probably 12-ish-year-old girl named Mary, right? I mean, we kind of gloss over this in the telling of the Annunciation. I always love how the scripture kind of says, oh, Mary was perplexed when she met a celestial being. If you know a little bit of biblical Greek, you kind of dig a little bit at that word perplexed, and it's called she was afraid, right? She was afraid, as most of us would be. But Mary rightly so, in the sense that Gabriel comes to her and says, okay, you got to think of this. This little girl is like the most vulnerable person in society, right? By virtue of how she identifies. So her whole future hinges on who she's going to marry or not. And even then, nothing is certain. But that's her fate in that time, right? And so here comes Gabriel saying, so you're going to have an illegitimate child. And, this other guy is going to be your surrogate dad, but for the child, but who knows if he'll even stay in the relationship with you or hang out, or whether he'll just look at it and go, you've brought such horror and shame to your family that everyone's going to kick you out and you're totally on your own. And by the way, you could be stoned for any number of those choices in her society to death, right? Like, that's what's being laid before her. Yeah, she's afraid. Jesus is going to be afraid when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus is going to be afraid when he's on the cross. Mary is going to be afraid to see her son on the cross in a state-sponsored execution. That's all really true. And what's also true is that Mary's also going to see Jesus growing up wild along the sea and setting people free and starting a spiritual revolution, feeding people who are hungry, giving water to those who are thirsty, helping those who can't walk find their way again, helping those who have lost sight of what really matters see what's the most important thing in our lives again, right? Jesus is going to do all this and so much more. And it's part of, for Mary, this belief that in the Jewish tradition, this is very true. It's true in the New Testament, but we forget about it a lot, is that our ancestors tell this story generation to generation. You will never find a place in the Bible where they say, there'll never be a desert in your life. The desert's real. The wastelands are real in our lives. You'll never see the Bible gloss over that. And for Mary, what's also true is that's true, and this story is also true, that yes, there's the desert in our lives, and one day the deserts will bloom. One day, the lion won't chase after the lamb. They will lay down together, and a little child will lead them. This is the story of the Messiah that's handed generation after generation that doesn't deny that fear is real, and so is peace. And so is hope, and so is love, and so is God. That God was there with Jesus and Mary. We say God is here all the time. In the times when it's wild by the sea and life is great, and times when it's the worst of days that they could possibly imagine, God is still there. Love comes running, as the poet says. And that's good news for us to remember that you're not captive by your fear, that you are enough just as you are. And God is going to be there just as God was there for Mary, just as God was there for Jesus. God is here for us, world without end. That will never change. And I kind of think that's what John Bell was after when he wrote Don't Be Afraid, is in a united churchy kind of way. He was trying to say to us, not that your fear is irrelevant or that it doesn't matter, but that remembering your fear, you're not alone. God is with you all the time. Don't be afraid, my love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid, my love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near. Friends, the Spirit in me honors the Spirit in you. And all the people said, Amen.